welcome to everyone joining us from all over the world in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Today, we have an opportunity to meet some of our global chair candidates, and we are going to start with consideration of some of the resolutions. We turn to 5 resolutions that have been vetted by proDA, then time permitting other resolutions of potential interest to proDA members. The author for each of the 5 resolutions will speak for a maximum of 2 minutes, followed by a maximum of 3 minutes for questions and comments. So I said, if there is ample time, attendees may speak for 1 minute to other resolutions by typing * hand up in the chat box with the resolution number and name. As Sue mentioned, it is possible now to view the resolutions committee report, and she has put that link in the chat box. And we are going to turn it over now to Sue, who will discuss resolution number 14 in support of a 21st century economic Bill of Rights. Sue?
Awesome. Thank you. If someone can make me co-host, I can help with spotlighting later in the event. So I'll just share resolution number 14 has been recommended by the Resolutions Committee to be considered in something called consent calendar number 1, which means that's a group of resolutions that have policy goals that are contained within the existing platform of Democrats Abroad. So the committee expects that this resolution may be adopted by unanimous consent. The resolution supports a 21st century economic Bill of Rights. It's based on President Roosevelt's 1944 State of the Union address. And in this resolution, we affirm the right to a job that pays a living wage, the right to a voice in the workplace through a union and collective bargaining, the right to comprehensive quality health care, the right to a complete cost-free public education and access to broadband internet, the right to decent, safe, affordable housing, the right to a clean environment and a healthy planet, a meaningful endowment of resources at birth and a secure retirement, sound banking and financial services, the right to an equitable and economically fair justice system, and the right to vote and otherwise participate in public life. So that's this resolution.
So please take over the spotlighting now. And okay. I will ask if there are questions or comments on this resolution. Yes.
I see Art with a hand up.
Yeah, I can write * hand up if you want, but no, I had a question. I should certainly know the answer, but is this format, is this document, whatever, part of a larger effort by others? Is this the wording that's being used by others?
Yes, this language came from Progressive Democrats of America, and there's an effort across multiple state parties to pass similar resolutions. So the state of Massachusetts has passed a version of this, and I believe I recently heard of 6 or 7 other states where it's in the works, and I possibly others. I'm not exactly sure.
Are we supposed to comment, or what's the drill?
We have I think we said we'd spend about 3 minutes on questions and comments if people want to talk about the resolutions.
I think it covers an awful lot of necessary territory. I'm not quite old enough to have heard Franklin Delano Roosevelt give his 4 Freedoms speech. I think that's where it was from, the 4 Freedoms. But freedom from want, which is one of the key ones that he mentioned, and this is covering it. It's key. I don't know that I'm a democratic socialist, but I certainly believe in a social network that covers and protects people from, the fact that we still have people in poverty in the United States is a tragedy, and there's no reason for it. So thanks for putting this forward.
Thank you, Art.
Betsy, you have your hand up?
No, I don't. I'm just keeping time because I have my phone here.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments on this resolution? Martha.
Martha has a hand up.
Yeah. Also think it's really a terrific resolution. Thanks for putting it forward. And I think it's also an interesting concept to queue stuff up for the coming platform. Like to not do the platform work all in one enormous go. It's a big job anyway, but to start to think about that a year in advance and to bring these things forward. So thanks for doing that.
38 seconds left.
Apologies to everybody for my spotlighting challenges today. I'll try to do better. I apologize to Art that you didn't get one at all, and to Martha that you got one for about a second after you finished.
Probably better for me that I wasn't.
All right, we have a work in progress here. And with that, we're going to turn it over now to resolution number 15 in support of an executive order for a federal reparations commission. And it is over to Antar Keith, chair of our reparations task force. Antar?
Hi, I just want to confirm if you can hear me and see me.
Yes, we can.
We hear you.
Right,
I'm just getting you spotlighted.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. As we know, DA has been in full support of HR 40 and all other reparative justice legislation since 2021. This comes on top of the DNC's vocalized 2020 support of a reparations study, the passage of DA's own 2022 DNC resolution to reaffirm that support, the Biden administration's support of a reparations study in 2019 and 2023, and Representative Cori Bush's historic resolution for a reparations commission introduced to the House merely 2 weeks ago. Between 2021 and 2022, we worked with the National Why We Can't Wait Coalition to build up a staggering 217 confirmed yes votes for HR 40, the House Reparations Study Bill. However, the bill was never brought to the floor. My new resolution differs from the prior in that it supports the standing up of a federal commission through executive means rather than exclusively legislative. It recognizes that President Biden is imbued with a unique legal, political, and indeed moral authority to enact a commission through executive action. It tasks the DA chair, furthermore, with the responsibility to transmit the aspirations of Black voters around the world directly to the White House. This is the only way to guarantee the global Black vote. As a global state party, furthermore, we are also behooved to support studying trauma, which not only affects Black voters stateside, but also those of us around the world who cannot escape the socioeconomic, physiological, and psychical vestiges of the past. Such intergenerational harms not only affect us abroad now, but compel many Black voters stateside to leave the United States. As this is an issue of democracy and freedom, we owe this to our brothers and sisters around the world who must take refuge because they can no longer breathe in America. I implore anybody who believes in justice to please support this resolution. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Antar. Let's take some time now for questions and comments. Who would like to begin? Art?
Me again. Thanks, Antar, for putting this forward. I was in the room when you gave testimony at the resolutions committee back in, was it 21, 22? No, whenever we had and Martha was there as well. And I know Jazz is going to be on board with this. He's talked eloquently over the last few days about how important it is to reach out to the Black voter. The one thing I will say, this is a great way for us to slap, however you want to phrase it, slap back at the Republican efforts to deny the history of racism in our country, to deny the actual history of race relations, the treatment of Black people over the centuries in our country. This sends a strong message to the people who are criticizing CRT and other efforts to present a true history and a representative history of the US. Thanks. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Art. And Jazz, you're next.
Hi there, everybody. As you know, Art, I probably was one of the first people I hope to have signed this, because for me personally, it absolutely does cover many aspects, the most important aspects of historical injustices to address these topics, then also to address restorative justice, as well as the social and economic disparities, as well as truth and reconciliation. What is also very important to point out is policy and legislative recommendations that such a commission can provide. And last but not least, also address national healing and unity. So those are merely the basis of why I think your resolution should also go through with unanimous consent. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jazz. And Martha.
Yeah, so I'm very supportive of this resolution, and I just want to salute the Reparations Task Force for the unstoppable work to move this forward. I think that, you go down every avenue with this, and it's, I'm particularly impressed with the way you're reframing the question of reparations into something that is relevant for so many different topics. And I think that's something that's necessary to move the needle on something where people have a fixed view. So thank you for bringing this forward, and you have my support.
Thank you, Martha. And we're going to Carol Moore.
And thank you, Caitlin, for letting me have a chance to indicate my support, Antar. And I do have a question. Do I understand that California is moving forward on this? And I wondered how you see that as perhaps having hopefully a positive impact in terms of what methodology they may have chosen to bring this issue broader into the consciousness of Americans around the world.
Can you answer quickly? We've just run out of time, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
No, Antar, go on very quickly.
No, yeah, I appreciate the question very, very much. California has really begun providing a bedrock of analysis that can be really replicated around the country. It's a groundbreaking step, and their study that they're going to be producing, the California Task Force, whom we're in, connection with, that's going to really form, a tablet that can really be replicated, and we can really start to see the intergenerational harms that actually form the precipitating cause and justification for reparative justice and the resulting consequences if we do not heal these wounds. So thank you for that question very much.
And thank you and good luck.
Okay, I think I understand that it's time to move on to the next resolution. And this is resolution number 22 regarding the use of funds from undisclosed sources during Democratic Party primaries. Sue?
Thank you, Bruce. So this resolution, the Resolutions Committee recommended this one for consent calendar 2, which means that it expresses policy goals that are not contained explicitly within the existing platform of Democrats Abroad, but it does reflect the values of our platform and the values of our party. So the committee expects this may be adopted by unanimous consent. The resolution seeks to stop the rapidly growing use of funds from undisclosed sources in Democratic Party primaries. And by that, it would protect and reinstate our basic rights to hold elections free from undue corporate and big money influence, which will help secure the youth vote and other liberal and progressive voters losing faith in democratic processes. In 2022, nearly 60% of all ads in Democratic House primaries were purchased by sources that did not disclose or only partially disclose their donors. And a lot of these funds were focused on solidly blue congressional districts where the primary essentially determines the outcome, but there were conservative and GOP supporting super PACs and others that were pouring millions into these races. Only 15% of the congressional House races are open for either party. The other 85% have all been gerrymandered into like one party districts. So this is one of the few places where people can really have their voice heard. Is in the Democratic primaries. So Progressive Champion Summer Lee started as a clear frontrunner, and this money made her just barely win. There are other examples. And I would say this resolution has 24 co-sponsors. There were no objections expressed at the resolutions hearing. One question that's come up is whether the DNC has the power to act on this resolution. So there are options like requiring all candidates to disavow outside advertising by groups with undisclosed donors. And there can also be sanctions against candidates contracting with campaign firms and operatives who work for groups in violation, which would be even more effective. And I would just say any associated cost is well worth it to protect democracy and renew faith in our party. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And let's take some time for questions and comments on resolution number 22. I see Art raising a hand. Take it away, Art.
Well, I was going to say I shouldn't go first again, but I'm happy to, of course. Well, you know, this was a resolution that was presented at the DNC the last time, at the last meeting, together with another resolution which just said something about banning dark, can I call it dark money or undisclosed donors? I think at the DNC, this grew out, as I recall, from experiences in Nevada. The chair there, Judith Whitmer, people came in and helped influence the primary, I think, for the Senate race, as well as one of the congressional races. So I would certainly be in favor of this. And I hadn't heard all the numbers that you just gave. So I am even more in favor of it, having heard what you just said about the experiences over the last cycle. So thanks. And I don't know what the capacity is to enforce it. I confess I don't. But
Martha, you're next.
Yep.
Yeah, so this was a resolution that was presented at the DNC recently, which I also supported to give the DNC the opportunity to go ahead and do this and commit these resources and set this up. And instead, they made a second resolution that had a different scope to it. I think that DA can pass resolutions like that to keep this issue in front of our members. I think that these issues are important. And of course, it's a long game to address this. But I think it's great to continue to bring this to the attention of the Democratic Party and also to educate our members on this topic.
Thank you, Martha. Do we have anyone else in the queue? In that case, we'll move right along to the next resolution. That is resolution number 6, to keep fossil fuels in the ground. I will speak on this one. The Resolutions Committee recommends DR number 6 for consent calendar 1, containing resolutions expressing policy goals contained within the existing platform of Democrats Abroad that the committee expects may be adopted by unanimous consent. The resolution to keep fossil fuels in the ground with its 35 co-sponsors and supporters is driven by the reality of devastating forest fires in the Pacific Northwest, more frequent and intense hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico and on the eastern seaboard, more frequent and powerful tornadoes and rain bombs in the Midwest, and the prospect of climate migration swelling at our southern border. It is what we Americans abroad experience increasingly everywhere. It is our global greenhouse gas emissions crisis. That crisis requires what the Biden administration calls a whole of government and society approach. We must use the executive, legislative, and judicial tools our democracy provides at the federal, state, and local levels to keep fossil fuels in the ground. We must embrace our DA mission, participate in our political process, elect Democrats, increase the awareness and responsiveness of our officials and elected representatives to our concerns, and work with the Democratic Party organizations to achieve our goals. We must engage with our DNC and DAECCC and our entire team in support of measures to prohibit drilling for oil and gas on public lands and waters in the US and its territories. We must strive to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies and tax breaks, redirecting the generated resources to accelerate the transition to a renewable energy economy, ensure just transitions, protect biodiversity, as well as increase US international climate finance commitments. We must listen to UN Secretary General, Greenpeace, the Sunrise Movement, and all who demand that we act with the necessary resolve now. Doing so ensures the health of the environment in which we work for a healthy society. I urge you to vote in favor of the comprehensive resolution number 6, if possible by unanimous consent, and together with the excellent complementary resolutions number 20 and 21. Thank you. And I am the moderator of this discussion too. So let's see, I see Martha is in the queue. And
okay.
Martha has his hand up, but we'll start with Martha this time.
Good.
I didn't want Art to have to go first again.
I know. Thank you, Martha.
So I think this is exactly the kind of resolution that that you would expect from Democrats abroad. This is what we stand for. This is an important issue of our time. And it's something that didn't make it into the Democratic Party platform 4 years ago or 3 years ago at the last convention. We need to keep pressing for this. There will be competing interests and reasons why the Democratic Party is not fully supporting some of these topics. But we need, as Democrats abroad, to keep lifting up our voices and keep showing support for this issue.
Art, over to you.
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, I looked through this. It's all good. Well, I'll say one thing, and I'm sure I'll lose all the votes here, but I work professionally in transport projects and energy generation. So I know the dynamics of a lot of this, particularly the elimination of subsidies for fossil fuels will be key in, forgive me, but using the market to drive them out of the marketplace. Things like the Highway Trust Fund, which subsidize, building highways instead of public transport. Getting rid of all that kind of things will certainly decrease the use of fossil fuels. And I support the prohibition on drilling. The only thing I'll say is, and I'm sure I'll lose. I know there was the mention of the Biden administration approving 6,000 or something leases over the last during their term. The only thing else, I think maybe it could do without that. I understand why it's there. I think some of that was an attempt to address the inflation issue, which certainly affected lots of Americans across the economic spectrum. So that's my only comment, but it's a good resolution and worth pursuing. Thanks.
Thanks, Art. And I'm not seeing any other hand up in the queue. I will say that the logic of this is a little bit like trying to fix a hole in your roof. And while you're doing that, you're paying others to drill more holes in your roof to the tune of perhaps $120 billion a year in the subsidy tax breaks alone, with another $20 billion in subsidies. And it seems to me we've got to stop that right away to fix that hole in the roof.
Bruce, sorry for interrupting. It looks like I'm not able to spotlight our next speaker. I wonder if my co-host credentials have been changed inadvertently.
I'll check that out and move on to our next speaker. And that is, let me see here, we're going to resolution number 16 to recognize Alaskan Indigenous sovereignty. With that, we head over to Caitlin Kennedy.
Hi, can you hear me? Audio test.
Yep, we hear you perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, hi. I am Caitlin. I authored Resolution 16, which simply calls for DA to recognize Alaskan Indigenous sovereignty and right to self-determination. The text, if you read it, it lays out the history of the United States occupation of Alaskan lands, particularly in the illegitimate 1958 statehood referendum, and the historic and ongoing injustice perpetrated against the Indigenous peoples of Alaska through U.S. government policy, including the approval of fossil fuel extraction projects like Willow and Alaska LNG. I've been really thrilled with a lot of the support that this resolution has received, particularly within proDA. But I just do want to address some of the main points of opposition and respond to those in case people have heard any of these arguments. So the resolution was drafted in communication with Indigenous Alaskan leaders and representatives and borrows from decades of reports submitted to the UN by the Indigenous Peoples and Nations Coalition, but some in DA have said that we need the consent of all 229 federally recognized Indigenous tribes in Alaska to pass this resolution. I want to point out that none of the people who've made that point have denied that Alaska was made a state in a sham referendum without the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous Alaskans, and this is a historical fact, and the resolution simply calls for DA to recognize it. Others have said we shouldn't pass the resolution because some Indigenous Alaskans supported Willow. resolution lays out the disparities Indigenous Alaskans face across all sectors. And until we address the root of those disparities, which make it very difficult for many Indigenous people to meet their basic needs, we can't really talk about consent or an even playing field at the negotiating table. And sources on the ground have described the extreme pressure many Indigenous peoples have faced over these fossil fuel projects. Others have suggested we need to seek approval from the Alaska Democratic Party before passing this resolution again. Nobody has denied that Alaska was made a state without Indigenous consent. So this resolution doesn't call for any concrete actions other than transmitting the text to Democratic leaders. So it seems strange that we would need to seek approval before we just make the simple statement that we support Indigenous people's right to self-determination. So yeah, I hope that y'all will take a look, read the resolution. I've also put together some educational resources included in the endorsement form. And I hope that we can all take a stand for Indigenous rights in this upcoming vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin. And we'll now go to questions and comments, beginning with Malaika. Malaika?
Hi, Caitlin. I probably asked you this question before, and I didn't really catch the answer. My concern with this resolution is that would it dilute the resolution for reparations? In other words, whenever there's something for other Indigenous people, somehow the Black situation is pushed to the side. And I'm very concerned about that because we're just now starting to move with reparations. If there's anything else they can do besides that, I really feel they will do that first because look, we're progressive, we're doing something. They're not going to put our issues. Black Lives Matter turned out to all lives matter. That does concern me.
Yeah, thanks, Malaika. Like, as you know, I'm very involved in the reparations task force. I wouldn't put forward a resolution that I would think would take away from any of the great work that we're doing on that front, which is, you're right, absolutely necessary and way long overdue and really non-negotiable. I think this is also non-negotiable. I think, you know, I've seen, you know, I was privileged to experience in August being at the UN and seeing reparations advocates from the United States there, along with Indigenous advocates, people in this Alaskan sovereignty movement, all working together, learning from each other, building support for each other. So I do think it's an area, I think, like, I really believe, I know maybe it's like trite or overstated or corny, but I really do believe that struggles are, to an extent, you know, interlinked, and like when we get justice for one group, it can propel, you know, things forward for others. And I want to note that the Global Black Caucus leaders, the reparations task force leaders, have endorsed this proposal, and I don't perceive it as competing. I don't think it will take away from any of the great work DA is doing toward reparations. Is there other hands up? I don't want to talk.
Yes,
I feel like I'm talking.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're going to go to Art.
Well, I'm sure you're going to put me in that Democratic Party camp, but I read the thing and I read your articles in Tag 24. I was wondering, you know, Alaska just elected a Native American congressperson for the first time, Mary Peltola. Do you know where she stands on this?
I have not reached out to Mary Peltola's office, nor did I personally feel it's necessary to do so. I can't tell you how she would feel about this resolution per se, but I do know that people I've worked with have majority support of Alaskan tribes. This has been an issue for decades, where there's documented reporting, and I did not reach out personally to Mary Peltola's office.
Okay. Martha?
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think following on what Art said, I would agree. I think, Art, you're saying this as well, that it's important that we re-elect Mary Peltola in Alaska. That's really important. That's something we can impact. So that's important. Oh.
I'm going to interject. Go ahead and finish your comment, Martha.
Okay, so there's a lot of Indigenous issues that we could be working on. They're super important issues. I would say let's look to see where DA can work with local groups in Alaska to implement the things that are important to them. I'm sure there are things we can do there. I'd like to see it be more concrete than just sending a letter, which is a first step, but I think there's ways we can support local communities.
And we'll take a very, very short response from Caitlin.
Yeah, I'm really excited, Martha, that you would be interested in looking at ways we can work more on the ground with communities. Happy to do that. Like you said, this is a first step. I mean, I think it's an important first step. I don't think it's gonna change the world, but I do think it's important that we do acknowledge this history, and I don't think it will stop anybody from getting reelected. And I don't think it will stop our GOTV efforts. If we can't acknowledge history because we're afraid someone won't get reelected, I mean, that's a little bit of a scary thought. Aren't we supposed to be the party that speaks out about the truth in history? So I hope that we can take that first step together and keep doing the great work DA does and look at ways that we can boost our advocacy and work with other groups too.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your comments and questions on all of these resolutions. We're now just going to take a couple of minutes to invite others who might wish to speak for just 1 minute on another resolution to do so by indicating * hand up in the chat box with the name and number of the resolution. And as soon as we have finished that, then we'll turn over to our candidates. Angela Fobbs.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to speak briefly about my resolution number 13, protecting our future by protecting our children. Our children are under attack by Republican policies, and I'm sure you've seen many of the things in the news, but I would ask you to take a look at the resolution because I've detailed a number of things from cradle to grave that are being done to our children. And we're always telling people that we want young people to vote, but we need to let them know that we understand what's going on in their lives. Children are the top killer of children is gun death. The second is suicide. We are banning books. We are not letting children learn our history properly. We are letting our children starve at school with lunch debt. The college education is too high. There are so many things that we're doing, and I've detailed a number of them. I probably left out some because there's so many things that are being done to our children. So I would appreciate your thoughts, comments, and your vote for my resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. And we'll take it to Sue.
No, I think the next person is Carol. Mine was an example.
Oh, I understand. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. And of course, I very much support all that has been said, and particular and Angela's resolution as well on this issue of federal legislation to protect women's rights. So timely after the Dobbs decision and what we've seen have been happening at the state level in Republican states. The good thing is, of course, we have more and more Democratic women in Congress, and they certainly try to get protection for women across the country with the Women's Health Protection Act, and also trying to get funding for various programs to support women in terms of affordable childcare, paid family leave, etc., which did not get through the Republican blockage and one or two, unfortunately, very conservative Democrats. So we ask for your support for this resolution so that women can move closer and closer to gender equality on so many fronts that is long, long missing in our country and, of course, around the world. Thank you.
Carol, thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank our candidates for their patience as we have gone through this initial stage of our event today. And now we are going to turn it over to our international chair candidates. And I will hand it over to Betsy Ettore, our co-chair of Monthly Mondays, who will introduce the candidates and moderate their questions. Over to you, Betsy.
Many thanks, Bruce. So each candidate will introduce themselves and speak for 3 minutes. And because of the tight time schedule for the session, I'll call out time is out if you go over time. Presentations will be in alphabetical order, and after all candidates have had their time to speak, there will be a Q&A session for roughly 35 minutes. First, I'd like to introduce Martha McDevitt-Pugh. Over to you, Martha. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks so much, Betsy.
Hold on. Sorry. I just want to get the spotlights corrected. I apologize. I got distracted by something. So everyone just take a deep breath. We're going to just, we're just going to prepare for the next segment. Okay. Bye, Angela. I apologize for that, everyone. Okay. That you can start the timer for Martha now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Hello, everyone. I'm Martha McDevitt-Pugh. I'm a California voter in the Netherlands. My pronouns are she and her. And thanks to proDA for inviting us today. I'm running for international chair for a few simple reasons. 2024 is an election that we must not lose. Human rights are on the line, starting with our most vulnerable communities, and Republicans won't stop there. All of our futures are at stake. Most importantly, I'm running because of all of you, this incredible community of volunteer leaders, which inspires me every day. You are the gold and the engine of our success, 9 million Americans living powerful lives across cultures with all of our humanity and our different points of view. And my story is one of those 9 million. I came to do DA through my advocacy work. I moved to the Netherlands because my wife is not a US citizen and our marriage was not recognized, which locked us out of US immigration. We mobilized LGBTQ Americans around the world to share our stories of being denied immigration rights, and we won. And we advocated for more than a decade for an issue that was not on the agenda of the Democratic Party, and with all the victories and disappointments along the way to our goal. I've had various roles at Democrats Abroad, voter assistance, a country chair and vice chair, leading a task force and a caucus, voter protection, the California state team, and I'm currently your global DNC representative. I'm on the board of the DNC LGBTQ caucus. So what will I do as international chair? Here's my promise to you. First, to put in place the governments to make our work easier. And that includes a foundation of top-down as well as bottom-up planning, budgeting, and reporting. We'll plan out the next election cycles and we'll measure our results as we go and adjust as required. And this will provide a shared view, and that's across DA. So you know what to expect, and there's accountability from global leadership to you as we plan the way forward together. Second, we will support our local committees, and that is where we get to know each other. We learn what motivates members and how they want to contribute. It's the pathway to leadership and to volunteer recruitment, and the DA welcome starts at home. And I think our distributive organization is really a strength. The ideas come bubbling up from the diversity of country committees, caucuses, and global teams, and we will help coordinate these ideas and help them spread. And last, we'll get prepared. All our global teams and leaders need to be ready before the campaign season. And we'll have our global communications team in place, graphic design, voter assistance, the help desk, advocacy, and study abroad. We'll support our IT and data teams, our state teams, and global caucuses, which provide an opportunity for so many of our volunteers to support our mission. And we'll build a global communication strategy that brings all of this together, where advocacy supports GOTV and the other way around. Now, in 2020, we reached 500 million people at DA. And with good planning and the timely start of digital outreach, we can reach 1 billion in 2024. And winning requires that we engage our community like never before, and we can't afford to leave anyone or anything out. There's a place for everybody. As international chair, I'll dedicate myself to your success, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you, Martha. Now I'd like to introduce Leedonal Jazz Moore. Over to you, Jazz. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Betsy. Hello and good day. And it's such a great honor being here today with even the other great fellow candidates. And thank you, Progressive Caucus, and all the progressive minds on this call for organizing this important event. I'm a red state but proud blue Texas voter living in Zurich, Switzerland. My pronouns are they, them, and my name is Leedonal Jazz Moore. Democrats Abroad's core mission lies in the fundamental right that every voice deserves to be heard, regardless of geographical boundaries. To me, the goal is clear: increase voter turnout and ensure that Americans living abroad exercise their right to vote in every election. As I see it, our mission extends far beyond party lines or political affiliations. It is about upholding the very essence of democracy itself. So how do we do that? Well, we must include efforts to increase outreach and engagement with the underrepresented, Black voters, young voters, individuals with disabilities. What is needed is an inside track. And I can offer this, and I can assure you that all these issues are everyone's issue, and together we make the difference. First and foremost, we must harness the power of technology in a streamlined, easy, and inclusive way with a multifaceted strategy that embraces innovation, engagement, and collaboration. So let me tell you what I'm really passionate about. Well, establishing robust communication channels, reaching out to citizens and targeted communities, dispelling any confusion or barriers to participation with timely, clear, comprehensive, and accurate information. I strongly believe in the power of grassroots mobilization. We have to create a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose, creating a network of passionate advocates working together, driving voter engagement at all levels. And we can do this by investing in local chapters and boosting local caucuses, task forces, state teams, by empowering them with the resources and training needed to mobilize their communities effectively. As international chair, I pledge to work tirelessly to forge partnerships with like-minded organizations, both within the Democratic Party and far beyond. We must employ a proactive approach to voter outreach, amplifying our message and ensuring that every American living overseas knows that their voice matters, because every voice matters to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jazz. Now I'd like to introduce Art Schankler. Over to you. Over to you, Art.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks to the Progressive Caucus for organizing this event. Wasn't quite sure how we're going to do this, but let me just say that I'm running for this office because I've been involved with Democrats abroad for almost 20 years now, from a volunteer up to the International ExCom as International Treasurer, and now as International Vice Chair for the second time. Yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize for the echoing. Okay, anyway, I will continue, and you can turn your sound off and read my lips or look at the closed caption. As I was saying, I've been involved with DA for a long time. I've seen a tremendous amount of growth. I think I can contribute to continued growth on the part of Democrats abroad, both in terms of getting out the vote, impacting elections, and advocacy for issues. As Martha said, and as Jazz said, they go together, they go hand in hand. You know, the more we can attract people to vote by emphasizing the issues that are important to them, like for youth voters particularly, and more we get out to the vote, the more we impact the elections. And the more we impact the elections, the more influence we have with Congress, with the White House, with other decision makers. So they go hand in hand. We must work on both. I just want to give a little more background about me. Maybe I'll do a little whatever. I grew up in Ohio and Michigan. I now vote in New York, that bastion of liberalism. I've worked professionally over the years. I worked with refugees in Asia and East Africa. I worked professionally on environmental projects. I even worked on Wall Street, although most of those projects were in the environmental sector, protecting water pollution. I was an advisor of the New York City Water Authority. Anybody wants to know about the New York City water system, happy to talk to you for hours about that. So in terms of getting out the vote, we need to focus more on media. I think, Martha mentioned that, we reach 1 billion people, but 99.9% of those people are not Americans. And we need to figure out how to target the Americans. I always call it finding a few needles and a lot of haystacks. But the other story I always tell, nobody gets it. There was a bank robber named Willie Sutton. And they asked him, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? He said, well, it's simple. That's where the money is. And so we need to be able to target where the votes are. Mexico, Canada, there are 1 million Americans in both of those countries, still largely untapped, although I think the country committees there are doing a great job. But we need to encourage them there and everywhere where there are large groups of Americans, as well as small groups of Americans. But our job as chair and vice chair and the rest of the ExCom is to decide whether to whether to send, where to put our resources, not only money, but also the time, the precious time of our volunteers. And that's what I commit to you, to make rational, cost-efficient, both in time and money, decisions about where to put our resources and lead our organization in a continued growth direction. Thanks very much. I look for your vote. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Art. Now we'll pose questions to the
candidate. If I didn't use my 3 minutes, I'm happy to give those time back to you for the rest of your life. Okay, give those 20 seconds to your life. Sorry, thank you, Betsy. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. We're going to pose questions to you all, and each candidate will get 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds to answer each question, and I'll say time's up if your time runs out, and you will be muted. We'll move on to the next candidate. We'll be changing also the order of speakers for each question. So I'm going to start with you, Art, and the question is, what do you consider the 3 most important issues DA needs to address?
Well, I think in terms of the issues that affect not only Americans overseas, but Americans in the US and everyone around the world, I thought the Economic Bill of Rights sums up them pretty well. It addresses the environment. It addresses, equity in terms of income inequality. It addresses voting rights. These are all important issues. So I think, if I was going to say, and I would focus on the issues that are highlighted in the Economic Bill of Rights. Thanks. That's not just 3, there are like 10 of them, but all of them are important. So.
Betsy, you're muted.
Yeah, I just noticed that. Thank you. Jazz, you're next. For the same question, what do you consider the 3 most important issues DA needs to address?
Thank you very much for this question. Well, first and foremost, we have to stick to our core mission, getting out the vote. And in relationship to that, we have to focus on the underrepresented, on the Black vote, on the vote of people living with disabilities, on the young voters, because we also have to highlight here, and this is diving into my second point, that we're not going to be winning this election simply because we're Democrats. It's not about the Democratic Party, it's about issues. So we need to address all of the issues that speak to our constituents, because that is exactly where we can win and where we can gain outreach. And the third point is exactly outreach. Invest in outreach in any place possible. Maybe rural, maybe, I don't know, somewhere back in Alaska, as we heard in one of the great resolutions proposed. Investing in outreach and making sure that they have all the tools needed, that it's easy and accessible, comprehensible. And not just outreach in getting out the vote, but also outreach in volunteering and finding new members. And how do you do that? On eye level, roping them in, talking about our issues, being friendly and welcoming, as well as asking them, where do they see their talents best utilized? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jazz. Martha, the same question to you. What do you consider the 3 most important issues DA needs to address?
Yeah, so I'm going to just address that on 2 different fronts. There's many advocacy issues that DA does address and should continue to address, and we should continue to do that. So coordinating our advocacy so it's most effective, I think, is a really important issue. We can't pick and choose between our 3 top issues. There's so many ground that we need to focus on. Our caucuses and task force are focuses on that, but I think we need to be sure that we're effective. We need to make that match between the resources we have, the number of volunteers we have, and all the different issues we can advocate on. So that requires recruiting. It's that open, welcoming Democrats abroad, and it's also the roadmap. So the second thing I would say is we need to have the roadmap so everybody knows what their place is, and we can find a place for everyone. The third issue that I think is really important for Democrats abroad, and I've mentioned it before, is that we strengthen our country committees. I really feel like coming out of the pandemic, we need to meet face-to-face again. We need to create opportunities for that. A lot of our work always has been digital. We've been hybrid for decades, but we need to get to know people so we can find out what their interests and talents and how they can fit into the organization. So I think that that's really important, is that we make sure that the country committees have everything they need to be effective, and that can bring people into caucuses and all kinds of groups like proDA and others, and have them bring their issues and their passion. And they can also, that's how we attract people from the outside, is we need to be relevant to the Democratic Party, and we need to be relevant to the Democratic voters. That's an important issue for us. So we need to work on issues at all fronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Our next question will go first to Jazz. The question is, our DA mission statement encourages us to participate in our political process, elect Democrats, increase the awareness and responsiveness of officials and elected representatives to our concerns, and work with the Democratic Party organization to achieve our goals. How will you strive to accomplish the above as DA Global Chair?
I'm very sorry because I have a severe migraine currently all day. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. Would you like me to put it in the chat box?
No, it's okay to repeat.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Our DA mission statement encourages us to participate in our political process, elect Democrats, increase the awareness and responsiveness of officials and elected representatives to our concerns, and work with Democratic Party organizations to achieve our goals. How will you strive to accomplish the above as DA Global Chair?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Again, as we've heard earlier today, also from Martha, we need to make sure that all of our processes work. We need to streamline our communications. We need to streamline our technical devices, but also make sure that every volunteer, every chapter knows what we're talking about, how we're talking about this, and how to do this. So we also need to invest in trainings, especially going into the 2024 election. We need to make sure that we know all of our civic rights, duties, topics, issues. I've had several conversations where that popped up many times, where people are like, well, I'm not really sure if I'm qualified enough to even do signups because I don't know this or I don't know that. So that is one big point where we can add a focus to. But overall, internal and external communications is a way forward, but also partnering up with grassroots organizations that are Americans that live abroad, or even military communities that don't live on bases. That's a huge untapped community that also, visit churches, have their own small little family group. So there are many opportunities for us to reach out and get everybody democratically elected.
Okay, thank you, Jazz. Martha, you're next, and the question again is, our DA mission statement encourages us to participate in our political process, elect Democrats, increase the awareness and responsiveness of officials and elected representatives to our concerns, and work with Democratic Party organizations to achieve our goals. How will you strive to accomplish the above as DA Global Chair?
So I think one of the most important ways that I would do that as DA Global Chair is to really assess what we can do and what we're going to be able to do. So I think part of that is having a plan. DA has gotten to be much more complex. This is an outcome of us really wanting to be effective on every level, on the state level, with all of the different constituencies in the Democratic Party and our electorate and all of our localities. It's become a more complex organization. And so we need to have a plan for what's going to have us win in 2024. We need to continue to work on all of our advocacy issues. There's a lot to it. So I think we need to put a plan together that shows our goal, like what if we get the funding that we want? What if we have the number of volunteers engaged that we want to have volunteers? Then we can do like the full scale of activities. But I think it's really important that we focus on what we can do and that we actually also work across our different groups, across our different caucuses, country committees, and that we bundle our resources so that we can be most effective. One of the things I hear when I talk to country leaders around the world is that they sometimes have events. Probably not the case with proDA. I think you get good attendance, but some of our country committees have events that have very unreliable or small turnout. So how can we bundle those efforts together so we can be more effective in raising awareness, in participating in processes, empowering people to participate in processes, and then how do we connect with other parts of the Democratic Party to do all of that? So I think we need to look and see how we can be most effective and how we can use our resources well and how we can bring people in and let them do the things that they love to do. I believe activism is joy. Let's empower people to do that.
Thank you, Martha.
Go for it.
Okay, Art.
I think I got the question, Betsy. Thanks. Well, as chair, as you probably know, the chair sits on the Democratic National Committee, deals with members of the Democratic Party. It sits on the Association of State Democratic Committees with chairs and vice chairs of other state parties. This is a great opportunity for us to outreach. I think we've done a lot over the last 2 years, over the last 10 years of reaching out to state parties. The creation of the state teams in the last cycle, very helpful in helping us communicate with state parties, get candidates that we had a lot of last year. That's one of the best ways that we can get outreach to people and make them aware of our issues and make them aware that we've got issues, not just taxation, but Medicare affordability, everything else, voting rights. And, you know, those candidate webinars are a great opportunity, not only for us to hear from the candidates, but the candidates to hear from us and become aware of our issues. You know, I was on the COVID-19 task force. We got 100, you know, for our efforts and the efforts of others, we got 100 congresspeople to send letters to the White House. Didn't accomplish anything, but we're still working on it. And, you know, and I was also on a door knock last year, and we're going to have door knocks in June. The amazing thing that I took away from that is how many the staffers that we dealt with, and they're supposed to know more than their bosses, had no clue about, you know, the number of Americans in their constituency who lived overseas. They had no clue about many of the issues that face us. So door knocks and reaching out to our elected officials directly is one great way. We're also going to establish a platform for people to communicate directly through phone calls and sending emails, make it easier for people to write about issues that are important to Americans abroad. Okay, thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, Art. Martha, you're next. This is a new question. One of proDA's goals is to improve democracy, inclusion, and transparency in DA and the DNC. In 2018, the DNC adopted several Unity Reform Commission proposals. What additional reforms are necessary?
So yeah, thanks for that question, Betsy. So yeah, I was part of the DNC when we were passing and putting into practice in the convention rules, the outcomes of the Unity Reform Commission. I think a start has been made at implementing the recommendations of the Unity Reform Commission. And I think that that work needs to continue. So for example, one of the recommendations is to move from caucuses to primaries. You know, that's an ongoing process as we go forward. You know, other innovations that have been made this year is changing the primary calendar, right? We're all used to the primaries going in the order of, you know, New Hampshire and Iowa and all that. And we've been willing to turn that around again. I think those kind of innovations are really important. So looking at the communities, with South Carolina having the first primary, looking at the communities that we want to bring into the party and embrace, and that we want to honor their participation. So we need to be able to, we need to be willing to change, right? Just because we've always started with New Hampshire doesn't mean we always have to do that. Those kind of innovations are really important. I think ongoing, we have to look at democracy inside of our party and make sure that we as Democrats abroad are creating an open place for discussion. So I think one of the things that I would do as chair as we come up to our global meetings or our DSP or other topics is make sure that we have more discussion forums. So we're not just being procedural and making our decisions and doing all the things we need to do, but that we really pull people into the process and hear their voices and have discussions and get to know each other across the different issues that that are important to us, and that we also talk across our differences, because we all, in Democrats abroad, we have very different points of view from one another, but we all want the same thing. We all want a fair and just world. And we have different ways to get there, different ideas about how we're going to get there, but we need to create more forums so that we're more democratic and we're having more discussions inside of Democrats abroad so that we can forward our issues. And I think the next executive committee needs to also make sure that they create those forums where people can bring their ideas, because I think sometimes now, we want to make good use of people's time, but we cut things off really short. So we need to give all of our community the opportunity to share how they think DA should work, and we need to together collaborate on how to make our organization most effective.
Thank you, Martha. Art, you're up next. Do you want me to read the question again?
This time I would, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Is my echo any better, by the way?
Not really. No.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what the problem is. Okay.
One of proDA's goals is to improve democracy, inclusion, and transparency in DA and the DNC. In 2018, the DNC adopted several Unity Reform Commission proposals. What additional reforms are necessary?
Well, I think there's an issue with the DNC that, 75 members of the DNC are appointed by the chair. And effectively, when we have a Democratic president appointed by the president, I think there needs to be more scrutiny about that process and the inclusion and who's being included in that process. I think, as Martha said, part of that reform was that the people who are not elected directly as delegates at the convention, like our DNC members, will not have a vote for the presidential candidate in the first round, but only in the second round. So those are important things. I think most of us took part in the delegate selection plan, the affirmative action plan that was part of that. As a way to bring people into the process. I think there's nothing more thrilling for people than to be a delegate to the national convention. Well, we have to work harder. I think over the years, we've seen people be delegates and then they sort of disappear. So we've got to, as we get a more diverse group going, to the convention next year, we've got to work to ensure that they stay with Democrats abroad and help us in our outreach efforts as part of the election. I think as Jazz said, and I guess Martha, we need to work on within DA to make the party, the group, the organization more welcoming, maybe a little less Robert's Rules of Order and more focus on actual things that matter to people, like getting out the vote and issues that we're discussing. I think because I know when I was a country chair in the Czech Republic, we'd have regular meetings, and we started out having,
All right, your time's up.
Okay, thanks. Sure.
Sorry.
I could reminisce some more, but that's okay. Thank you.
Jazz, you're next. I'll repeat the question, okay?
Yes, thank you.
One of proDA's goals is to improve democracy, inclusion, and transparency in DA and the DNC. In 2018, the DNC adopted several Unity Reform Commission proposals. What additional reforms are necessary?
Thank you very much for the question, Betsy. So one that completely stands out for me is Voters First in terms of eliminating 400 superdelegates out of these 715 for the first ballot for the presidential nomination. But I also want to emphasize very loud and clear that these recommendations that have been proposed and made are nowhere close in being officially adopted by the Democratic Party. There's so much work to be done. There's so much more knowledge to be gathered there. But I actually want to bring this conversation a little bit over back to DA itself, because Democrats Abroad is wanting more accessibility, is wanting more diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility policies to be in place from the DNC and so on. But as I said, I'm turning this a little bit around to us. Shouldn't we be the ones to start implementing all of this, what we already know? But we're also, even us within DA, we're so far away from that to be really a place of what I always say, love and light. You might laugh now, but of true inclusion, so that every voice is heard and every voice is acknowledged and every person feels included, not just within our own community, but even in this whole democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. Next question goes to Art. What issues do you believe are currently divisive among the membership, and how would you propose to deal with them as global chair of DA?
Hi, thanks, Betsy. I just wanted to add to the last question you asked about reforms to the DNC. One thing they could do is make their meetings open virtually and let people watch not only just the general session, but the committee meetings and the caucus meetings where the action really happens. I think it would allow, we've done this for years as part of DA, during the pandemic, a lot of people came to us and asked, how do you have virtual meetings? We can provide that counsel to the DNC, would make it a lot more inclusive, I think, for a lot of people. There is some unofficial streaming. Anyway, now I forgot your question. It's about just two words.
Come on, wait a minute.
Huh?
Divisive.
Oh, divisive. Well, clearly over the last year, this issue of FEC compliance was a divisive issue. I think most people are prepared to move beyond that. I know, talking to a lot of country committee people who were initially questionable about it, I think, and as I said earlier today on the XCOM, even the countries who were, quote, maybe not fully compliant, it was all about past activities. I think, if we focus on the benefits of what we're doing, I think we can help resolve that issue and get people on the same board, and trying to raise money and do everything else to help us win elections. I've made the point before that under the new regime, and I think there was a question about this in the chat box, everybody at country committee can now be partisan in their messaging without running afoul of some FEC regulation. And I think that's, I know somebody said earlier, we're not going to be voting our Democrats, but if Donald Trump is on the ballot next year, I think he's going to be, sorry to say, a big vote getter that we need to tap into people's fear of Donald Trump. And we can do that with partisan messaging that maybe some country committees couldn't do before. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Art. Sure. Jazz, you're next. I'll repeat the question, okay? What issues do you believe are currently divisive among the membership, and how would you propose to deal with them as global chair of DA?
Thank you, Betsy. There are so many topics that are actually really divisive currently within our community here. One is, for example, clear communication. There has been, in some cases, some miscommunication or not very clear communication, or even the lack of transparency. Lack of transparency. The reasoning for that, though, is I do think that we have clear communication. I do think that we also have enough platforms that all of that has been shared. But when people are not being included, and it also circles back to what I've said previously, when people do not feel included, they do not feel heard nor valued. And when that happens, you leave the table. You don't want to be part of it. And because of that, you miss out on valuable information as well, which initially then also mongers fear. But there are so many other topics on that. But what we need to do is we need to foster open and respectful communication. We need to see common grounds. We also need to facilitate dialogue. And by doing this, just looking at all of the resolutions that came out, no, not every resolution is everybody's cup of tea, but we were able to have respectful conversations with each other. We need to also promote, again, diversity and inclusion. This is bedrock to Democrats and to Democrats abroad. We need to
Oops, I think we lost Jazz.
Yes.
There goes the dialogue.
Oh dear. Well, it's just come to time now, so I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move on. But oh dear. Okay.
They'll probably be back in soon, and we can sort that out.
Okay. Thanks, Sue. Okay, Martha. The question 4 to you. What issues do you believe are currently divisive among the membership, and how would you propose to deal with them as global chair of DA?
Right. So, you know, I hear this from time to time in Democrats abroad that we're divided or that we're divisive. You know, I like to think of it this way. I like to think that we agree on most things, that we agree that we want to elect Democrats. We agree that all of our advocacy issues are important. What we don't always agree on is how we're going to get there. And that's where we have to have the dialogue. That's where we need to be able to talk to people across our differences. So just let me name a couple of sort of internal, more how do we get there issues that I think we have different views on that we need to come together around. And one of them is, are we a grassroots organization or are we a global organization? I'm sure everybody in Democrats abroad has their own view about that. And I think that, you know, from my perspective, of course, we're a global organization. We need to provide resources globally, but we also need to recognize that our country committees are essential to Democrats abroad. So I think that requires dialogue. I think the other one is what it's going to take to win in 2024. I think we don't all have the same view on that. I think one of the things that I think is really important is we need to bring the communication up to a global level and have a strategy. We cannot put the burden on the caucuses and task forces to do all that work. That essentially amounts to asking underserved communities to do their own messaging and to hope that it will filter up to global. I think we need to coordinate that much, much better. And I think that we can do that, but it's a matter of making sure that we're not dividing by putting all of our issues in different groups, but we're bringing things together. And I would, you know, just underline what Jazz and others, you know, we say so often is that people need to feel included in Democrats abroad. They need to find a place for themselves. You know, I saw in the chat, Beth also mentioning training. I think our global presidential primary is something that will bring us together. And where one of the first things that I will do if elected as international chair is make sure that we have all of the materials available for our new and returning leaders so that they can be successful in the global presidential primary. We can have fantastic events and we can remind ourselves of how great it is to be together and to be united and to be forging a path forward together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, is Jazz back on? Because he's next in line for the next question.
They are back. They are back. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
my
Jazz
wife
is they.
So
Right.
my wifey crashed. I'm back, but can you please repeat the question? I missed out on
Yes,
that.
okay. The question is, when President Biden announced his candidacy for the 2024 nomination on April 25th, DA global leaders emailed DA leadership with messages that appeared to endorse President Biden and encourage other DA leaders to do so. Despite the longstanding policy in DA prohibiting primary candidate endorsement, the Progressive Caucus sent an open letter to the DA ExCom about this real and perceived endorsement of a presidential primary candidate. Given the urgent need to restore faith in democracy, including open and inclusive nominating processes, what is your position regarding the messages sent by leadership on April 25th?
Great. Thank you very much, Betsy. Well, firstly, what I want to point out is that we do have to remember the great accomplishments that have been done by our current president and vice president, Kamala Harris. And this is something that we cannot just brush under the table. This is some real empowerment movement there as well for all of us. But I also agree with you that we have to maintain an open play field, an open playground for additional candidates as well. So far, there have not been any others that have risen to the occasion. So for me personally speaking, and not for the organization, but for me personally, I, of course, want to support the winning team anyway. But when it comes down to DA, it is also very important to acknowledge that we as leaders lead by example. And if we keep an open playing level for all and make it inclusive again, my favorite word of the day, then everybody else will have the same understanding of why it is important that we support the administration that is still currently at place. I've also read the letter. I think that the concerns that were raised in the letter are very valid and should be taken very seriously as well, because sometimes perception of something can alter reality, so to say. So that's why I think that it was good that the letter was written and that the issues were raised in it, and it also gave us again a great opportunity to discuss it, to look at it, and learn from it.
Great. Thanks, Jazz. Next up is Martha. I'll repeat the question again, Martha, because it's quite long. When President Biden announced his candidacy for the 2024 nomination on April 25th, DA global leaders emailed DA leadership with messages that appear to endorse President Biden and encourage other DA leaders to do so, despite the longstanding policy in DA prohibiting primary candidate endorsement. The Progressive Caucus sent an open letter to the DA ExCom about this real or perceived endorsement of a presidential primary candidate. Given the urgent need to restore faith in democracy, including open and inclusive nominating processes, what is your position regarding the messages sent by leadership on April 25th?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So, I also received requests from the Democratic Party on that day or the day after when Biden announced his candidacy to immediately endorse him as a candidate for the next election. So it was something that was happening throughout the Democratic Party, not something that I was comfortable with. We were on a call with Jamie Harrison, the chair of the DNC, and he asked all of us to go online and endorse President Biden. I think that, we as Democrats abroad need to have our global primary process, and it needs to be open to the other candidates. There are so far 2 other candidates that have announced that they're going to be running for president. They're going to have to go through the process of getting on the ballots in 50+1 states. So it's one thing to announce that you're running for president, but there's a whole process involved, including with Democrats abroad, to get on the ballot. So, we need to be neutral to all of those candidates. We need to give all of them the same process and acknowledgement in terms of, their pathway forward to being a candidate in the presidency. I also understand that there's a lot of concern about this election in 2024. And I know what is behind the push from the Democratic Party to already support our president to get a second term. So that is a background behind all of this. And I think it was very valuable for the Progressive Caucus to put those concerns on paper so we can have the dialogue and discussion within Democrats abroad about how, and so that everybody knows exactly how to relate to this issue, right? We're not going to be promoting one candidate among another. That is not what we do, and we're not going to be doing it. Yet we need to be able to talk about our president and his record and what he's doing. He's still in the job. So we need to be able to do both of those things. We need to be neutral towards the 3 candidates or more as they come along. We need to put our process in place so that they have an opportunity equally to get on the ballot. Then we run our election, which is also an open process. But we need to continue to be able to talk about the track record of our president. So I'm grateful that that letter was written and that we've had that dialogue.
Fine. Thank you, Martha.
Hey, I got the question, Betsy, don't worry.
Okay, all right.
I think you may have to remind me in the middle. Well, I went back and read the email. I actually did not think it constituted an endorsement. I thought the problematic part of that email is that it encouraged the leaders to endorse President Biden. I thought that was slightly problematic, but we should remember, as individuals, we are able to endorse candidates in a primary process, but we should not be using our Democrats have brought titles or anything else to relate that endorsement to that. I think that's been the policy over the years. And over the years, I've been a very strong gatekeeper about our policy of not-endorsing candidates in a primary. When we've had candidates appear in webinars, I have tried to make sure that we've had equal coverage and allow all candidates to appear. In 2016, I was involved in our presidential selection process where we did make sure that we had interviews with each candidate. Somehow I got a guy named Rocky Fuentes, who I think ended up running as a Republican sometime. So, but we did provide equal access to him. So I think that's important. Again, I think as Martha said, we can't tout the accomplishments of the Biden administration without formally endorsing a candidate in our upcoming global presidential primary. And I would expect that to continue to happen over the next year. So thanks.
Thanks, Art. The next question is from Martha, and this question comes from a DPCA member. Regarding processes for developing and approving DA's resolutions, charter amendments, and platform, what improvements, if any, would you make?
Great, thanks. So yeah, I'm grateful for this question. It's a good one. I've really seen an evolution in terms of how we deal with resolutions and charter amendments in the decade or so that I've been in DA leadership. So I think we are trying new things. I think that's helpful. What we're also seeing is a real proliferation of resolutions, which demands more time for us to do those. So I think that we need to, do that more throughout the year and also provide discussion venues and start early before our global meetings so that we can have those discussions. There's so much that we can contribute to each other when we work together on text and get down into the details of things. And I think we can also come together through resolutions. So I think we need to have a more robust process around that, especially if we're going to have lots of resolutions. It really just does take time and effort. Not everyone's going to want to do that, but I think that would be one of the things that I would do. I'm also really interested in this process we're going to go through at our next meeting where the resolutions have been grouped in various ways in the hopes of getting unanimous consent. Now let's see how the body deals with that. But I think that is one way to try to get a larger number of resolutions through the process and look and see what is really a more contentious issue versus a less contentious issue. Let's try it. Let's see how that works. What I would do for charter amendments is I would have a committee. It wouldn't have to be a standing committee, but certainly there's a lot of consensus around the fact that our charter needs work. And so I think that we need to have a process where those kinds of charter changes and amendments can be proposed, not just, in the month or 2 or 3 prior to an annual meeting, but that we really use the middle of the cycle to work on that. Because those are our guiding rules in our document. And we need to have a charter, that is understandable and that
Time, Martha.
behind. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Art, do you want me to?
No, that's okay. I think I got it. Well, in terms of charter amendments, I would agree with Martha. We should have have a committee work on it. Every time you read the charter, it seems you find an inconsistency or an ambiguity or something, no matter how much you work on it. So, and even if we have this committee, it'll probably still happen, but we should work to make sure that they, as certain changes are implemented, not everything is adopted to correspond. We saw one yesterday about, electing the right number of voters in each country committee. So there's a lot to be done on that. Again, in terms of the process, and I think particularly at the meeting, as I'm not a Robert's Rules person, I'm not an expert, but I think there are a lot of things that maybe we could adopt as rules, guidelines, whatever, that would shortcut some of the approval process, limit the ability of people, if the vote seems clear, we don't have to go to a roll call vote on each resolution. The grouping of projects, grouping of resolutions this time around seems like an effective way to hopefully, again, shorten the process. And I think as part of that, an outgrowth of that, is to give better guidelines about what kind of resolutions should be presented to the DPCA. Some of them have very little to do with, things, and some of them do, and, there should be better guidelines, I think, disseminated to the membership about what kind of resolutions. The DNC has done this. Frankly, I think they went a little far in limiting the kinds of resolutions that are presented now at the DNC, but I think we can do a little better job of giving guidance to people about what kind of resolutions can be presented. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Art. Jazz, I'll repeat. Do you want me to repeat the question?
It's okay. Thank you. It's
okay.
Great. Thank you for yet another very important and good question. And I love that you're raising all of these good questions here today on this call. So what we do need to look at is how we roll this all out. We've been hearing a lot that this might be an impossible job for one person to do, and this and this and that. And yes, this is not a one-person job. This is a job where all of us in DA need to come together. We need to come together early on into the fold. So for one, establish early enough committees, for example, the Charter Committee or Resolutions Committee, so that they could get the groundwork, legwork started. And in regards to the Charter itself, I mean, right after our global AGM, I would hope that we tackle this together as soon as possible. And for that, I personally would see a 3 to about 5 month period, actually, to first establish a committee. The committee looks at the issues, and then we invite everybody from DA to the table, to a roundtable discussion, so that their input is being heard and seen as well. These might be a little bit of baby steps in the process, but at the long haul of it, we're going to make a very big leap with this. And also establishing early enough rules and regulations for the meetings themselves, also for the charter amendment meeting then itself, because what is the most valuable thing that each and everybody of us on this call today have is time. Time is something we cannot, it's gone. It's something unbringable again. And if our time is wasted in some of these meetings through nonsense, through rules that might be too difficult or might have not been disseminated early enough so that people can learn them and study them or practice them, then we have what we've seen a couple of weeks ago at our last meeting: wasted time, energy, and efforts. And that's not what we're here for. We're here to uplift, empower, and inspire. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. I think we might have time for one more question for the 3 candidates. I'm just going to defer to Bruce. Is it okay if we continue with the last question? Bruce?
Hi, this is Sue. Yes, that's fine. Bruce and I were chatting back channels. It's good to go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sue. Okay, this is for Art. What changes would you propose for global caucuses, and what are your plans for increasing their effectiveness, your process for appointing caucus leadership, and your views on electing global caucus leaders? What is an appropriate term length for a global caucus leader?
Well, let's start with the last one. I think the appropriate term length is 2 years. I think the appropriate, I know there's a move to have caucus leaders elected. I think we should certainly take the input of caucus members into the selection, but I think we should have an application process as we did in the last cycle, with the determination of the caucus leader made by the ExCom, the chair and the ExCom together. But again, we should take the input of the caucus members, and we should welcome that and encourage people to provide their views. In terms of expansion of the caucus and making them more effective, we have to support them. Again, as Jazz said, it's a matter of communications and helping them reach out to members and people in the wider community. I think we can also do a better job of connecting. Some of the caucuses do a good job of this already, but connecting them with the Democratic Party caucuses that exist in the US, within the DNC and some of the state party caucuses, is a way that, I think it increases the attractiveness of serving on a caucus, but it also increases the effectiveness of our caucuses themselves, not only in terms of getting out the vote, but in terms of making policy changes. So I think all those things will help us. I apologize, I don't have to mind people to addition. Although I will say I work on the Ethnic Council on the DNC, and this is one area that maybe we could have an ethnic council. You know, I work in Eastern Europe. I live in Eastern Europe. There are a lot of returning people from the diaspora, or whatever you want to call it, coming back to their home country. And there should be a place to encourage those people to join the Democratic Party and to vote from abroad. So that is perhaps one caucus that we could add to our existing group of caucuses. You know, when I make this joke all the time, when I hear caucuses,
your time's finished.
Okay, I was
sorry.
going to make a joke, but just a bad joke.
No jokes.
Okay.
Martha, you're next. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Thanks. It's in the chat. So, you know, I think we have terrific global caucuses. I've seen an incredible growth in the number of caucuses. I think it's something we should be very proud of. As far as increasing their effectiveness, I think that we need to have not a one-size-fits-all model for caucuses. As a vice chair of a caucus, I sometimes go to the monthly meeting and I wonder if caucuses feel competitive with each other, that they all have to do the same thing and they have to do lots of events. I think we need to look caucus by caucus to see where the focus should lie and where that caucus can have the biggest effect. And we need to look also within the caucus to see where are the activities that we can uplift to global. I would like to see more of that. We need to have global events and the caucuses can certainly contribute to that. So I think that can also increase their effectiveness. And I'll just repeat again, I don't think the caucuses have to, in a dispersed kind of way, figure out all their issues and all their messaging and communication on their own. I think we need to bring that together. That doesn't need to be in kind of silos or bubbles, but we need to bring it together and make sure it's part of the core messaging of Democrats abroad. I also think we need continuity in caucuses. So I would not go through a process as we did 2 years ago where the caucuses were not very active for several months, waiting for a change that was about to happen. I think you never lose momentum as a political party. So I think we need to have continuity. I trust our current caucus leaders. I think that they should, you know, make plans, continue in their roles. I would have conversations with them. And I would also look caucus per caucus and ask the caucus leaders to have succession planning. Caucus leaders need to be developing new, young or not young, but new leadership to come forward and to get trained and to learn how to be effective in the organization. And so, you know, we always, as caucus leaders, try to find people who are going to take the job next after us. So I think that that planning process is really important to make sure that we lift up new members. And as far as the appropriate term length for a global caucus leader, I think that's a great conversation. What is the appropriate term length? I don't have an answer on that. I would listen to the community and find out what people think. And as far as electing global caucus leaders, that is a very resource intensive kind of project, something we haven't done before. I think we should definitely have a look at what the pros and cons are of that. You know, I know that there's already proposals that are brewing to do that. And I just think
you're out of time now, Martha. I'm sorry.
We need to see what's feasible. Yeah.
Thanks, Martha. Jazz, would you like me to repeat the question?
All good. Thank you very much, Betsy.
Okay.
So as a caucus lead myself, I fully understand the value of the caucuses, how much they bring to the table, how valuable the work is that each and every caucus does and their members do to reach out to constituency groups. Again, we're not going to win the presidential election because we're simply Democrats. We're winning on the basis of issues. And all of these caucuses cover these issues perfectly. Every caucus does it in their own manner, in their own tempo. And I don't think that there is a competition between the caucuses. It's actually quite contrary. My experience has been is that the caucuses work together. They communicate together. They figure out what works best together and try to also utilize networks and resources together in a very, very positive way. In terms of changing the global caucuses structure itself, I also am aware that there have been calls for having the chairs elected instead of appointed. I, again, here personally speaking, I would actually endorse this movement, even though it would be quite a lengthy process to getting that done because there are so many parts at stake that then also need to be evaluated, need to be calculated, again, going back to the DPCA voting reps and so on. So this is also something that I encourage all of us as DA have the conversation about. In regards to what the appropriate time length is, I actually think it depends on how their community within the caucus, so their steering committee teams, if they work together, if they find that A, they still want to do it is an option, and B, if after a certain term, if their teams are still comfortable with their leadership. So, and I've been thinking hard about this, if I should become the next international chair. There are definitely a few caucuses where I would have some conversations with them and see if their leadership is still really willing to continue the hard work that they're constantly doing, or if they might want to consider being replaced by somebody new, so that we have a very quick new transition and onboarding there as well. This is something that I would do within the first 42 hours. There's 9 vacant positions on team leads, but there are also some vacancies within the caucuses as well. So these need to be filled up as well very quickly. We need to get team leads, caucuses, state teams, and the country committees all together, working together and making the good noise. And just to end it really quick, we need to help caucuses make this good noise. And as Jamie Lewis once said, never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, I just want to say thank you, Martha, Jazz, and Art for this Q&A session, and also for coming here to our proDA events. We're very grateful to you. Now we'll hear from Bruce to talk about the forthcoming AGM and proDA's role in it. Over to you, Bruce.
Thank you, everybody, for what I think was a really great event. We went a little over time, so this is going to be very short. proDA is really eager to get to DC for our AGM, and we're going to be there knocking on doors on June 8th, and on June 9th, we're pleased to co-host the welcome reception on the top of that Hive Hotel. We're trying to get progressive leaders to join us for that, and also with statements during some of the breaks in the business meeting on Saturday and Sunday. Pramila Jayapal, the Congressional caucus leader, progressive caucus leader, will be one of those speaking, and stay tuned for more announcements on that front soon. And I think I'm going to leave it at that and take it over to Sue for some of announcements for our upcoming events.
Thanks, Bruce. So yeah, we have our monthly members meeting coming up on June 3rd. And we're very excited on June 19th. You will not want to miss this one. It is Fair Share Taxation and Enforcement with renowned economist Gabriel Zuckman. The link to it, to RSVP, is in the chat, and we'll share recordings afterward. It's going to be very, very interesting. And then we threw in the link for the global meeting for those who aren't already haven't already RSVP'd for that. So yeah, that's what's coming up with us. So thanks so much to the candidates. Thank you to folks who worked on resolutions, people who commented about their resolutions, asked questions about resolutions, and I look forward to seeing everybody online or in DC for the annual general meeting, Democrats Abroad.